All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about something incredibly important, but something that often gets overlooked, the crisis of anxiety in Black America. We're going to break down the causes, the stigmas, and some of the paths to healing.
Okay, let's just start with a number that's, well, it's pretty shocking. When you look at high school students, almost 10% of Black students have reported attempting suicide. Now compare that to about 6% for white students. And look, this is way more than just a statistic on a chart, right? This is a massive red flag. It's telling us there's some incredibly intense pressure happening that we really need to understand.
So why? Why are these numbers so different? To really get to the bottom of it, we've got to look at how the weight of anxiety isn't the same for everybody. For Black communities, it's often described as a double burden.
And this slide, this really breaks it down perfectly. You know, on one side, you have the kinds of anxiety triggers that can affect anyone, things like early trauma or a family history. But for Black Americans, there's this whole other layer of risk factors stacked right on top. We're talking about the constant stress of dealing with racism, the fear of police violence, having fewer opportunities. It's not one or the other, it's both at the same time.
So what does that do to a person, day in and day out, living with that constant extra pressure? Well, it actually has a name, and its impact? It's huge. It goes way beyond just mental health.
Yeah, researchers call this weathering, and that's such a perfect word for it, isn't it? Imagine a rock on a coastline getting hit by waves, day after day, year after year. That's what the chronic stress of racism does to a person's health, both mental and physical. It literally wears you down over a lifetime.
And let's be super clear here. We're not just talking about feeling stressed. This has real life or death consequences. This whole weathering effect is a major reason why, on average, Black people in the US live shorter lives than white people. That's the bottom line.
And if that wasn't enough to deal with, you've also got these powerful myths and stigmas that build up walls. Walls that make it incredibly hard for people to even ask for help when they need it.
You've probably heard this one before, right? The idea that anxiety is just a personal weakness or something you can just pray away. It kind of frames mental health like it's a choice, a character flaw, instead of what it actually is.
But the fact is, that's just not true. Mental health conditions are real health problems. You wouldn't tell someone with heart disease to just think it away. It's the exact same thing. It often requires real professional care.
Then there's an even more dangerous myth, one that's honestly rooted in old, racist ideas. It's the claim that these differences in mental health are somehow natural or biological.
And this is just flat out wrong. Science is clear. Race is a social construct, not a biological one. Pushing this myth is just a way to ignore the real problem, which is racism itself, and that whole weathering effect we just talked about. It's the experience that creates the disparity, not biology.
So you've got these myths, and on top of that, you have very real, practical barriers. There's the stigma in some communities about not wanting to seem weak. There's the legitimate fear of being labeled crazy or dangerous. Then it's incredibly hard to find a therapist who actually gets the whole racial trauma piece. And then there's the money. I mean, as recently as 2018, more than 1 in 10 Black people didn't even have health insurance. So how are you supposed to get help?
Okay, let's get back to some of the numbers because they really show just how big this crisis is.
Check this out. Black Americans experience serious mental health problems 20% more often than the general population. And when you think about conditions like PTSD, which are tied directly to trauma, well, that 20% starts to make a lot of sense, doesn't it? It's a direct reflection of that extra burden of racial trauma.
And this timeline, this is really worrying. Look at the period between 1991 and 2017. For white teens, suicide attempts were actually going down. But for Black teens, the rate went up. The gap didn't just stay the same, it actually got worse.
Okay, so after all of that heavy stuff, it's so important to remember this. There is hope. There are absolutely clear, effective ways to find healing and get support.
So what works? Well, the most effective routes usually involve professional help. We're talking about things like therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a big one, to learn new coping skills. Sometimes medication can really help manage the symptoms, and for really severe cases, there's even residential treatment for more intensive support.
But it's not all about formal treatment, right? There's so much that can be done on a personal and community level to build up that resilience. The basics, like good sleep and exercise. For some, activism can be a powerful way to channel the anger and trauma. And of course, just building a solid community of people who get it, that's huge. Plus, things like meditation and yoga can make a real difference too.
But out of all of this, maybe the most crucial takeaway is this one. For any of this to be truly effective, the care has got to be culturally competent. You can't just talk to any therapist. Finding someone who truly understands the role that race and racism play in your life, that can be the absolute game changer. It's not just about finding help, it's about finding the right kind of help.
So that leaves us with a big question to think about. What does a mental health care system that's truly fair for everyone actually look like? It's about more than just making sure everyone can get an appointment, right? It's about building a system that really sees, understands, and knows how to treat the unique experiences of every single community.